The topic today is covering equipment costs and how they reflect back to fields. And, when you think about features, where does this fit in traction? So, as most of you know already, we've got three different tiers, Basic, Plus, and Pro. This particular feature that we're talking about today, the equipment allocation and overhead, it's a little bit of a combination of both Plus and Pro. So, at minimum, you have to have at least the Plus level to do what we're showing you today. And then Scott will get into some of the fixed cost on the equipment where you can put in the cost per hour per acre on a machine and how it reflects back to the field records. Or if you want to see the actual cost being reflected back to your field profitability reports, that gets more into the pro level. So as far as terms of features go, that's kind of where they lie at in the table there. So great to have Scott Nussbaum here today. He's also one of the co-founders of the company. So he's going to be covering the equipment side, how to set up equipment, how to, look at the equipment accounts, make sure you have that set up correctly, the difference between ownership and operating costs, as well as hopefully we have time to cover this, but we want to kind of deep dive into the overhead allocation part. So if you got those miscellaneous expenses and things that you're not really sure what field or machine it really goes to, you can set up overhead and quickly disperse that back to your fields. And then Scott will spend some time analyzing the field profitability reports, showing that impact of the equipment expenses back to fields from a fixed cost versus actual. So, Scott, I will let you get started and take it from here.
Okay, you're seeing my traction screen now, right?
We do.
Okay, so last week we kind of started in the simple part of field profitability. We looked at how the input cost get into there, how you buy it, how the cost average out. What we're going to focus on today, we also kind of talked roughly about other expenses, cash rent, crop insurance, things like that. So today we're going to cover how all the other costs get to your field. So the biggest one we're going to hit on here is going to be equipment cost. And I'll say, oh, I think we've got somebody that needs to be muted there, Brian. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to start from scratch and set up a couple pieces of equipment. I'm going to use them in field records to give them to fields. I'm going to put some cost on them and give you some simple examples so you can kind of see how those costs flow through to the field. So the equipment where you add that is under this resources area to the left to equipment. So I've got a lot of equipment set up in here, but I'm just going to make a new piece of equipment up here. And I'm just going to call this one my 25 tractor. I've got an option here as to whether this equipment is used in field records or not. So anything, tractors, planters, combines, things like that, I'll want to say yes to that. Any equipment that I want to keep track of cost on that I'm not going to use on field records, I'll turn that off. So my tractor I am. The key adding equipment here, any equipment that I want to keep track of the cost, that I want to allocate things right, like repair costs to, that I want to have ownership cost associated with, I want to set up in this area. So when you're setting up equipment, don't think about whether I own it or not, whether it's leased, whether it's dad's equipment that I borrow but I have cost on. Any equipment that I want to track cost on or use in a field record, I set up here. So for this first one, it is a tractor. It's used in field records. The default cost here, the default cost I kind of look at, this is going to be, we'll give you an option that if your cost and traction aren't really good, we can use this default cost. This default cost can be used as a starting cost, and we'll use this kind of as a reference point. So a lot of times what I think about on this default cost is maybe that's kind of, if I know some university kind of standard average costs, things like that, I could put that cost in. So I'm just going to plug in a random number, 10 bucks, and then I can have that either per acre or per hour. So if you're tracking hours worked on equipment, I want to set this to hours. If you're not going to track hours, probably acres are the easiest thing on it. So if this tractor was leased or borrowed, I'd be all done. In my case, this equipment is one that I own, so I'm going to say this equipment is owned. It's now going to take me through a few different things. First thing it wants to know is the entity it belongs to. So I'll say it belongs to Traction Farms. I'm going to tell it the account that it's associated with, the farm equipment traction. The rest of the information here you do not have to be exact on. I think the main thing to tell you when it comes to keeping track of cost on the equipment accounts and traction, that all is just done through journal entries from your accountant at the end of the year through purchases. We don't keep really detailed records on that information and traction as it is today. So this isn't a place to go in and type in all the information off your accountant's tax depreciation schedule. This is for your records in here. Where the entity and the account will come in is that when you do a market value balance sheet, this is what determines where you can put in current values on it to get it to show up on the market value balance sheet. So we'll go in and say, okay, the date that I purchased, maybe that was April 1st of 25. My ownership cost, we'll say I paid 200,000 on it. We'll say my estimated ownership. And here again, if this is really old equipment, you don't know the exact cost. For what we're doing here, you don't have to be exact. If you want to put the exact in there for reference, it certainly doesn't hurt. But if you don't know it, your best guess will work for what we're doing here. The estimated ownership, if I expect that I'm probably going to hold on to this for 10 years, I'll just put 10 years in there. That's how long I expect to keep it. And the residual value is what I think it's going to be worth at the end of those 10 years. So what we do with all these values is down below, we're calculating an annual ownership cost. And when I hit this little calculator button, it's going to calculate that for me. How we calculate that ownership cost is pretty simple. We just take the purchase cost minus what you said it was going to be worth at the end of that time and divide it by 10, and that's the ownership cost. So what we're saying is we're spreading the cost of that equipment across the years that I use it there. So all of this is just a way to start taking that cost and matching it up to the years that I use it on here. So this isn't your tax depreciation. Most of the time that tax depreciation is higher the early years, lower the later years. This is just kind of getting cost to keep track of the equipment on it.
Scott, we had a question come through before you leave the screen here. So I think this is regarding the default cost, where you got that $10 per acre.
Yes.
Is this cost is this used to bill a landlord in an invoice, or is this somehow tied to that, to the invoice side?
Ken, I saw that. I'm going to tentatively say yes. It's been a while since I dealt with that. It's been so long as I've looked at it, I've kind of forgotten that. I'm pretty certain that's yes. If you hit me up afterwards, I'll do a little bit of digging and confirm it. Good question. But I think that is it. So I'm just going to save. That piece of equipment is now in there. I can see my default cost is $10. My actual cost right now is $10,000. I'm going to add a second piece of equipment. This is a 25 grain truck. Now this grain truck, I'm not going to do it in my field records. I don't want to, when I harvest fields, I don't want to go to the level of keeping track of all my grain trucks, things like that. But it is something that I've got cost with. I'm going to have repair costs to it, and I kind of like those costs to get accounted for somewhere. So with equipment like this, I can say, okay, this equipment is not used in field records. And when you turn that option off, we're going to give you the ability to automatically split those costs across all your fields for each year. So once you get this set up, you'll see it. I'll show you the example on it. It's going to show up as far as cost on my field profit center, even though I'm not doing field records. So when I do this, the easy button on this is I can split it evenly by all fields. So this is just going to split it based on the acres off each field. Now, if I want to get picky on this, and I know that grain truck's going to haul corn and beans, and it's going to haul a lot more corn, I could do a weighted split by crop. This probably gets too picky for most people, but I could say, okay, let's do 60% for the corn. I don't know, these numbers are good. 30% for beans and 10% for wheat. You can do these splits any way you want them. And each year it's going to look at the crops on the fields and do the cost based on the crops in the field. So it's just a way to get more accurate if you want to. I'm actually going to go back and just do it evenly splitted by field. This I'll do the same thing, that this one is owned. It's on the Traction Farms entity, my account. I'll put it to my trucks account this time, put in.
Scott, we had a question about this part right here, the ownership cost. Is this a pro feature or can we find this in basic and plus as well?
Brian, you may want to check that while I'm doing this because that side I do not. I think it is only a pro feature. No?
I'm gonna go check on that one just
Yeah,
to confirm
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Kent,
but
you're
I'm
hitting
I'm
me. Oh,
thinking
that's
it
Kristen.
was
Okay.
yeah, it was a good question there, but I'm thinking it's pro, but I'll be right back with that answer.
Very good. And maybe this one I just kind of expect to keep till it about dies. So maybe I say, okay, that's good. I'm going to hold on to that for 20 years. Maybe I don't expect much value, maybe $1,000 at the end of it. Again, I can calculate it and come up with that value per year. So the key to all of these are ways to kind of allocate cost to things. So these pieces of equipment, they could have all different types of costs. They could have repairs cost to it. They could have insurance cost to it. But when I look at my field profitability report, I'm going to see one line for that equipment. So what I'll see a lot of people do, these equipment things can be used, are pretty powerful for getting cost to your fields. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you an example. And if you're not at this point yet and this doesn't make sense to you, you don't have to do it. This is something I'll see a lot of times. A brand new user may not worry about this, but maybe you get a year or two down the road and you want those field profit centers to look a little better. It's a good way to kind of clean them up. So I'm going to set up a piece of equipment. I'm just going to call it overhead. And the equipment's not used in field records. I'm going to evenly split it by field. This isn't a real piece of equipment, so it's definitely not owned. That's all it is. And what that overhead's going to be used for is all the miscellaneous cost on the farm. As I'm buying like fencing supplies, as maybe I'm doing work on a barn, as maybe I've got some costs like bigger costs, like interest on my operating loan, things like that. And interest may be big enough you want it broke out separately, but all those miscellaneous costs that you don't really think about that you want to see as a cost to your field, you can throw all those costs to this overhead. And that's going to make it show in your field profit center statement without giving you a huge list of expenses. So that overhead, I mean, if you like having every one of those expenses on your field profit center, you don't have to do this. You can allocate them individually. If you don't, this is kind of a way to summarize them and get them put together. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take that tractor that we just set up and I'm going to use it in a field record just so we can get it to some fields. So I'm going to go to field operations. I'm going to go to field records. I'm just going to do a new field record, a tillage record. And that's what I'm going to do to my 2026 fields. I'm just going to select all the fields at this point. And just skip, we'll leave the hours worked. Maybe it was actually 20 hours. My equipment, I'm going to pick out that 25 tractor. I've got my total hours there. I will pick out also, I think we got a field cultivator here somewhere. That's the acres there. I won't worry about people. I'll show you a little bit what I've done now. So if we go look at the report we're going to keep looking at, but it was in last week's session. I had a field that I set up. Let's find it for home field. And last week we put seed to that field. So when I look, there's a seed that I did last week. This year, this time now when I look at it, we'll see I've got a tractor there with some cost. I've got a grain truck there with some cost. I've got a field cultivator with a cost. I don't have any overhead there. So kind of pay some attention to these numbers and we'll talk a little more on the cost. So let's say I got a repair bill and those repairs, I'm going to say for my case, those repairs are on both the tractor and the grain truck. So I could do this as a bill, but in my case, I'm just going to say I'm writing a check today. So I go to my account register, pick out the checking account, and I'm going to add a new payment in here. Pick out who it is I'm paying. I'm going to say it's repairs expense. I'm going to say we spent $10,000. And my allocation, I'm going to allocate to equipment. And I'm going to pick that 25 grain truck and the 25 tractor there. The year that I want to go to, this is my 26 years. These are repairs I'm doing for my 26. So I want related to the 26. So this is kind of similar to what we do in the inputs. Each year, we're going to track the cost associated with that piece of equipment for that year, that crop year. So these are where it is. So if you're doing, even if you're putting in bills from 2025 for equipment expenses, and you want those equipment expenses to be as kind of maintenance for next year, if you want it on next year's crop, put 26 for it. If you want it for last year's crop, put it 25. It's really up to you on that side. And this repair, if maybe most of it was for the tractor, maybe 9,000 of it was for the tractor, and 1,000 of it was a grain truck, I'll just do that. And maybe at the same time, I bought a bunch of parts maybe for repairs to a grain bin or something like that. And those parts I want to put in the repair expense equipment or building. But these are ones that I just want kind of spread across all my fields. So maybe I had $2,000 of those parts. And I'll go in and go to equipment. And I'm going to allocate those now down to overhead. Go ahead and just save and close there. So kind of show you now what we've done is first thing we'll do is go back. I'm going to go to the equipments area. And when I look at my equipment now, I'm going to start seeing a few things in here. So I'm going to switch my crop year now to 2026. When I look at 2026, now I can see for 2026, that tractor's got $19,000 of cost on it. It's been used on $919 or 919 acres. Right now, that equipment is costing me 20 bucks an acre. If I want to see what makes it up, just click on that. This will take me to everything we've done with that tractor. So this is going to show all the field records on it. It's going to show my operating costs. My operating costs are the repairs, the costs that are allocated to it. And it's going to show my ownership cost, which is that cost I had set up. Now, my example here isn't very big. I've just done a small number of field records, got a small number of purchases. One of the things is this list gets real big. Anytime you want to filter this list down, say I want to get a list of all the repairs, all the operating cost on the equipment, this filter up above is where I can go in and say, okay, just show me my operating cost. Mine's not very exciting. I've just got one. But if I had a lot of different payments related to that equipment over the year, that's what lets me filter it down. If I just want to see the field records to see all the fields it was used in, I can list it that way. And all of these as I go, the nice part here is that if I see something that doesn't make sense, I've got the option here to go straight to the purchase. So if I caught a mistake at that point, I could go in and fix that mistake. So as I look at this, a couple things just to talk about here is that default cost, kind of this area as I go, we're always going to be accumulating that cost. So we're going to constantly, every time you add a new cost to it, that cost per acre, cost per hour is going to go up. every time I use that on a field, that cost per acre is going to get spread over more acres, more hours, and that cost per acre will go down. But this default cost, what I'll see a lot of people do, if they've got really good numbers, they went out to university and got standard numbers, as you go, this kind of gives me a place to look at my equipment and start comparing it. So as I get towards the end of the year and I start looking at this, and if this number's what I believe is a good kind of industry average standard, what it should be costing you, and if that's showing me a really high cost, that's starting to tell me maybe I should be looking a little bit closer at that equipment, what's going on. That was this just a freak year or has it been going up continuously? Do I need to look at rolling it into something different or that? So just a quick snapshot where I can see things. And the important part, though, as we get to, if I go back and go back to that Field Profit Center report now. So that Field Profit Center report, what we'll see now is now we're seeing the costs that are kind of making up here. So right there's that 2066 on that equipment spread over the 100 acres. Our grain truck's 289 just spread across all fields. My overhead's $1.96 spread across all fields. And I'm now starting to see good equipment cost on my fields. Last couple other things then just to talk about. I'll kind of talk a little bit. So I guess I'll open up real quick, Brian. Maybe I'll take a pause here for any
Yeah.
questions, kind of what I've done so far.
We actually got quite a few questions, Scott. So I did research a bit on the ownership cost feature. There was a question whether it was in Plus or Pro. It looks like it's only available in Pro, so you got to have the Pro tier to put any sort of ownership costs in there. And then we had the same question but different. In that same area, there's that toggle for equipment used in field records. And for those who have basic and plus, you will not have that feature. That's also in Pro as well.
Yeah,
So
I
that
think the
overhead
other,
stuff is all in Pro. Yeah.
yeah, the other to say here, if you're not in Pro, there's up here the option where I can do this either based on default or actual. So if you're in Pro Plus and not Pro, my option is default, and then I'll see the default cost there. So, and this option, even for your Pro users, this is kind of nice, is maybe I've done all my maintenance cost up front, and maybe these costs are just way out of line. The only reason they're out of line is that I haven't used that equipment on enough fields yet. That cost is going to go down, and I don't want my profit center to look that bad right now. You can always toggle back and forth, or maybe this year you just didn't do things right. You just missed allocating cost and things just aren't quite right. You can always toggle back to this default cost, and that kind of gives you another way of looking at it there.
Had another person ask, so we've added all the equipment on each field operation, like harvest, trucks, grain cart, plus combines on each field record. Is that necessary?
It is not. I would say you're going to be more accurate if you do it that way, but it's a lot of work. And what I would do, at least, is I would tend to take anything like your grain trucks, your carts, anything like that, and I would just go back. You can change these after the fact and just go to view details, edit, just switch them, turn off that used in field record, do that evenly split by field records. It'll go back and update everything for it, but that's just going to save you a lot of work on the field record size. So it's up to you. I know some people like having that when they look at the field records. If you do, it's certainly not hurting anything, but my personal thought is it's a lot easier not to do that.
Yep. Yeah, it just really comes down to preference and how much time you want to put into this thing. Because really it's going to ask you more questions on the field operation side if you keep adding more and more items to the field record. Another question here for you, Scott. I think this is referring to that ownership cost, so that
Yep.
1950 that we're seeing there per year. How is this cost different from depreciation?
Yeah, and smiling because in the accounting world, it is depreciation. Most companies would keep depreciation for taxes, and keep a separate set of depreciation. Accountants call it book depreciation. And basically, because the IRS, you want to write things off as fast as you can, but for your own records, you don't want to. So this is depreciation. The only thing that we do with this today, the only place you'll ever see it used today is on this equipment costing. We don't use it other places. We've got it there, and in the future we may do some other things with it, but it is a form of depreciation that we're just calling ownership costs. So that's a good question. Yeah, allocating fuel to purchases. That one really is up. That is a matter of personal preference, I would say. I mean, fuel, probably the most common sense fuel. I see some people that say, I don't care really what equipment it went to. I just want to take all my fuel cost and spread it across all my fields. In that case, overhead's the easy way to do it. Now, what I would tend to do if you want to get a little better on it is that I would take those fuel bills and maybe springtime as I'm getting those fuel bills and I know it's going to several tractors, allocate it to those tractors. Maybe fall time due to combines. I mean, that allows you to get a little more accurate. Today, we don't have the ability in traction to keep fuel inventories and allocate inventories to equipment. I know that's something we're looking at for the future, but that's kind of what I would be looking at as far as allocating it to. It depends on how much detail you've got.
Yeah, and if that's something that you all want as far as a feature request, go ahead and put that in the chat. Just say something like want fuel inventory or something like that, because we do manage the feature requests coming in, and that will kind of dictate if this is something that you guys really want in the software. We will try to raise that up and get the product and engineering team to work on that. Scott, going back to the equipment setup again.
Yes, I see that.
So for the plus user, so people have just the plus, that equipment used in field records toggle there, is that always turned on or off?
I have a feeling that's not even there and that everything you set up would be used in field records, so it would be
I think
available.
that's
So,
correct. I
yeah,
saw that in the plus account there. Yep.
yes.
Thanks, Bill, for that comment there.
Yeah, Ken, a
Well,
working group of equipment for running multiple fields of the same operation. I know that's something I'd be curious on, and we're probably going to see some surveys on this. We're kind of thinking about maybe doing a mobile app. And the mobile app side, I know that's one of the areas we would look at. I know we've had that request for the web also. So something looking at, yeah, I won't promise anytime soon, but definitely something looking at.
another question here. So this is more about projections, Scott. So you're doing a lot of things, in real time here as things happen in the field. But when you think about if you want to kind of start planning 2026 and doing like a projection on a machine and the cost and the impact on those fields for fields you plan on farming in the future, is there anything like that in traction or in the works?
We do not have that today. What I'm expecting, I know we've had people asking for like crop planning and having crop planning tying into budgets. What I would see is that at some point kind of tying into that crop planning side, but not today.
Can I put my lease equipment to the equipment and allocate that back to a transaction level?
That would, I mean, any leased equipment, just say it's not owned. And then as you do those lease payments, you're going to allocate to that piece of equipment just like I did the repairs. And then it'll take that lease cost just like it takes the repairs cost. So the only difference you'll see on that leased equipment is when you click down through here, you're not going to have any ownership cost on it. But when you look at your operating costs, that lease cost will show just like repairs and other cost in there. So probably technically at least isn't an operating cost, but that's where we lump it in. So good question.
You had a comment here. I think this machinery cost costing feature is great. I'm not on traction and currently spending plenty of time on manual entry to accomplish this with multiple platforms. However, I don't think I can give up on tracking and allocating labor expense. So I think there are some comments here about labor expense. That's something that we've heard from others, because in the field operations side, you can allocate a person to a field record, and you can enter hours in the field and that kind of thing for that person. It's just that it's not pulling over the like your cost per hour over to that field profitability report.
Yeah. So I'll throw a couple things on labor. We do have plans to make it so you can have cost on people and allocate them to them. But I know when we did this on FarmWorks, the question always came, well, it's like, what do I do with all their extra time? They work this many hours in the field, and it's hard to get that right. I'll tell you what I've seen some people do today, which is a good, easy way to do it. These overheads, you can have multiple overhead ones. So what I'll see a lot of times is maybe I'll set up just maybe one overhead for labor, or maybe I know maybe my harvest costs are bigger than my other costs that I could have a harvest labor, another labor, and a planting labor, some things like that. And just instead of doing them in field records, just let the program split them between them. And that's kind of where that splitting based off crops is kind of nice. And if I know I got some fields I'm going to be working a lot more, I can do a higher percent to it. Is it as accurate as doing the hours to it? No. But the drawback to the hours is kind of how do you account for all those extra hours? So that's kind of a quick, easy way to do it. I know some of our users who've been on Traction quite a while who are really super tuned into this, they'll have a lot of different types of overhead things like that for tracking different categories. So there's kind of ways to do it. And again, if you're not there, if you're just getting started and that doesn't make sense, don't worry. That's all stuff you can kind of fine tune in the future.
Yeah,
Yeah, the question about finance charges and all that. I mean, really what that comes down to is preference, is that the only difference on it, I mean, I'll see some people, and there's nothing wrong with this, like that red expense land. I see some people that really like seeing, even though I'm spreading across all fields, they like to see all those costs down in this other expense area. If you like having them that other expense, allocate it directly. If you really want to cut these other expenses down to just the biggest things, then put them to overhead. So I mean, as I look at some of the example, I mean, finance charges, the interest may be big enough you may want to see that separate, but a lot of the other stuff probably could just go to overhead is what I would say.
yeah, a lot of questions on fuel expense. I think it gets tricky to know how you want to allocate fuel expense to a machine, to a field, to overhead. I just routed off three different options that how you could do that. So it really comes down to a process and what works for you. And I would say stick with it. And if it's something that you like the first year, how it's reported back to the fields, you keep doing it that way. But that doesn't mean you have to keep doing it that way in the future. So I think it just really comes down to preference, right, Scott?
It is, yeah. And I mean, again, everything's designed so that if your first year you're just getting started, you put all that stuff to overhead, and maybe next year it's like, okay, I'd really for next year like to see that fuel broke out a little more. Maybe then I set up a separate overhead for fuel or something like that. And then maybe my last year I start doing it by equipment or something like that. So it's very flexible year by year. You can grow with it.
Is ownership percentage available if owned by more than one entity?
It is not today. And I know that is something that we've gotten other asks for, and I know there's plans in the future to do more on the entity side with being able to have like fields associated with entities and equipment split by entity. It is not. Today it's single entity.
A question earlier, we just didn't have a chance to touch on this. If I want annual ownership cost to equal current year market value depreciation, can I keep updating these fields each year to reflect appraisal of equipment?
You cannot. It is whatever is in there is what's going to carry across for field to field or year to year, I should say, on that. And yeah, and I've had different discussions on that as accountant. I kind of have a hard time wrapping my head around it because, yeah, it's very much designed to say I'm taking the cost I paid and spread that across the years that I've got. So that's the way it would work today.
Yeah, Brian, do you have a question?
Well, I guess I'd probably just hit the wrong button, but yeah, I do want the to be able to allocate the fuel. I guess I was just trying to get into the chat there. Must have hit the wrong thing, but just
Gotcha.
want to be able to allocate the fuel. I noticed that you're starting to put the feature in, but it's not quite totally available.
Fuel side, I'll tell you what our first step is that we're working on, and this we've had a lot of requests just for tracking the quantity purchased. So what you'll be seeing, and this is more likely later this year, is the ability when I buy fuel to put the quantities in. It's not going to do an inventory, but that'll at least make it so the end of the year I can see how many gallons I purchased, some things like that. But that's kind of our first step towards getting towards that fuel. So we hear your request on that and understand.
Yeah, and if others have that request as well, you can unmute yourself, or if you just want to put it in the chat, that'd be great. Yeah, thanks, Brian, for at least mentioning that. I know back in the FarmWorks days, you could buy fuels inventory, and we've been through a lot of training classes on this particular thing, and it was always kind of difficult to know how much fuel to allocate to what machine. That's where it gets a little more challenging when you think about inventory for fuel. But definitely a lot of people loved it back in the day. So I think it's just Scott's probably just a matter of time before we start to look at this in traction.
It is, yes. Okay.
Lots of great questions. Yeah.
Yes, good.
Any other questions? And just so you know, we are recording this and we will share it with you at some time today. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Marianne. Thanks, Brian. We'll make sure to add you if you haven't been added already. Apologize for going over today a little bit, but with just so many great questions, we want to make sure we're hearing everyone's voice. So yeah, so this last slide here is just more of a reminder. So this week we do have a couple other webinars that we're doing. So on Thursday, if you have a Keystone Cooperative account or an FS account, we'll be going through the bill integration a little bit deeper on those two webinars and kind of showing how to automatically bring bills in and how to approve them and how that impacts your books. So we'll be doing that this week. So if you're a customer of either one of those, make sure you sign up. And then we're going to be doing a repeat on this field profitability and equipment costing um, on February 3rd and February 17th. So I know this is a repeat of these webinars, but I guess what I really like about these webinars is the fact that we do end up covering different topics and different questions are asked. So we'd love to have you again, even if you've been to a prior webinar on these topics. And we'd love to hear on other topics that you guys want to talk about. So if there's something that's is on your mind that we should be thinking about doing a webinar on, let us know. You can put it in the chats. You can just give us a call or do whatever you want. Email us. We will make sure to get that topic added. Anything else, Scott, before we leave today?
Nothing on my side. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Oh, we had one more question pop in here. Hours downloaded to Traction don't match with John Deere Ops. Traction takes the start of field. Do you know what that means, Scott?
It is. We're not getting the actual hours from Deere today. The way we get it today is just not available. So it does get calculated based off the start and stop. It's not the hours in the tractor. It's the hours worked. So I know it's something we keep kind of pushing back to find ways to do it, but today that's just the way it is. So yes, I understand.
Okay. Well, with that said, we will end today's webinar and hope to see you at a future one. Thank you.